a model whom we've been covering this murder mystery basically since day one. They have finally apprehended someone. Put up the picture full mass here. And I want to tell you why this story is important. Initially, the authorities were suggesting that somehow, regardless of the evidence that we saw right in front of us, that somehow this may not have been foul play. We called BS on day one. Local Minnesota police announced on Wednesday that 41-year-old Magnus Daniel Humphrey was taken into custody and is now facing murder charges for the killing of 31-year-old LA-based model Maleesa Mooney. Per the New York Post, Humphrey was picked up by police at his Hopkins, Minnesota home on an unrelated warrant and was identified as the suspect responsible for Mooney's brutal slaying. Humphrey had prior convictions related to false imprisonment, gun and sexual assault charges. He was also released from prison earlier in the month. September 12th, 2023, LAPD conducted a wellness check at Miss Mooney's apartment at the 200 block of South Figueroa Street. Her family was concerned because she was not responding to their text messages. She was last seen a few days before. An autopsy report later revealed that Mooney's body was severely beaten, tied up, and stuffed into a refrigerator with a gag in her mouth. Mooney's death was labeled as homicidal violence. Quote, the blunt force traumatic injuries observed at autopsy are generally not considered acutely life-threatening on their own. This is what the original document said. We read it right here on Indisputable. However, based on the circumstances of how Ms. Mooney was found, these injuries suggest she was likely involved in a violent physical altercation prior to her death. Now, I want you to understand how the government, the local jurisdiction, split hairs on this and tried to dissuade individuals from the reality of what we all could see and what the family was saying. That if it had not been for the fact that she was stuffed in a refrigerator with a gag, all right, something over her mouth, they would have ruled that her injuries could not have killed her. Okay, that's what they were saying. That something else happened. It was unfortunate, but given the context, these injuries are not severe enough to kill a person. But because she was found in a refrigerator, circumstances that are available, we are going to say probably a violent homicide. Probably. There's more. They did note cocaine and alcohol found in the system. Her sister, Jordan Pauline, believed the suspect wanted to sell Mooney's iPhone and laptop. She also claimed her sibling was pregnant at the time and had always wanted to be a mom. Quote, I can't imagine what my sister went through. And it pains me to even think about it. It's honestly so stressful, Pauline said. Authorities called on the public to identify the suspects in this case. Per the department, Humphrey was arrested at his home for an unrelated federal warrant as he was on probation for narcotics offenses. He is expected to be expedited to LA and reportedly has a court hearing on Thursday. The link between Humphrey and Mooney was not immediately made available to the public. We should see some elements of that being exposed very soon. But once again, we have a case where the community clearly saw that this is an actual murder, and the family definitely saw. They didn't like the initial wording of this, did seem as if it was life-threatening, except for the circumstance of her being in the refrigerator. All of this was insane. But it looks like they have apprehended someone. Obviously, we hope it's the right person. If it's not, then there's another miscarriage of justice happening. We're going to stay on top of the story. Ben, thoughts here?
I mean, it's a tragedy all around. And I think the only thing I could add is that it's just another reminder of how difficult it is to be a woman in this world, how many factors you have to take into account that men don't ever think about, that don't cross our minds. Very hard to be a beautiful woman in this world. And I think there needs to be some sort of education acclimation, education, training of men growing up to understand how to be around women, how to treat women, and how to not let anger develop towards perhaps some of these people's, lack of ability to ever be in the company of women. It creates such violence. We see it in school shooters. You see these, incels, these involuntarily celibate people that wish they could have a little bit of what other people have. And so they instead take it out with rage and violence. And it's disgusting. And I just wish people, were able to seek help, were able to feel as though society was, that there were outlets for them to be able to work through their severe mental health issues, because so far too often it tragically leads to things like this. And there's just no words at that point.
You say something that's very close or akin to mentoring. And I say often that mentoring does not have to take place just because we have a personal relationship. I'll give an example. If I'm out with a young lady, I'm always going to open the door, no matter what. I'm always going to be the person who pumps the gas. These are gestures that other people see. And sometimes a small gesture can make a difference in this world. And if we live by example, example is the greatest guide for someone else to follow, not a lecture.
And
yes.
And I think also, Doc, speaking publicly about that stuff, I think we've got this very twisted sense these days where on social media, we talk about everything unimportant, everything not noble. From the shallow to the superficial to just a picture of our lunch. Let's start creating hashtags about be chivalrous and show a video of yourself or share a text about what you do like that. I always like to, whenever I'm walking with a lady by a street, I stand on the street side just to make sure that, God forbid, if something went wrong, I'm the one taking the brunt of that. Talk about it. Let's create a culture of better behavior. And hopefully that'll start shifting some people who want to follow their influencers' behavior instead of following their shoes they're buying or their lunch they're eating. They start wanting to be like them by doing virtuous things.
Yeah, well said there, brother.